All right, joining me now, trial attorney Joe Richardson is here, and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor David Bruno as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this evening. David, I'll start with you. You heard the defense attorney there in the Ford case talking about, let's be honest, let's be honest. What he's being honest about is a teenage girl who's having issues with her weight, that could have pushed her in the direction of wanting to commit suicide. Was he being too honest? That's the question I have for you.
Yeah, I think that was pushing it a little bit, Michael. But look, I mean, he's got a point. First of all, when the police show up at the mother's house, she tells them about hospitalization her freshman year and that she was suicidal. It's also corroborated by a couple of other people. There's some evidence that the bullets were the same that came from her mom's gun and her mom's house, and it could have been her mom's gun. And look, this is the problem that this jury is going to have. I mean, but for his actions thereafter, what he did with the vehicle and how he lied to law enforcement, this is a not guilty. This is a not guilty based on the medical examiner, because the medical examiner cannot rule out suicide. And that's essentially what proof beyond a reasonable doubt is, when a medical examiner says this could be suicide and a mother said that she's suicidal. You couple those two things together, I think that's reasonable doubt, but then the jury's got to deal with his actions and lies, and that's the conundrum in this particular case.
Joe, absolutely. I agree with David. At the end of the day, one of the issues for prosecutors is there's no real motive here. They haven't been able to pin it down. They've admitted they're not even sure exactly how this went down, and that's reflected in the charges in the case. But I want to ask you about the questions that the jury asked. And I think it suggests that suicide is still in play. They wanted to see the prop gun that the prosecutors used in their closing argument. That was not allowed to go back to them because it was just a demonstrative aid. They also wanted the measurements of the gun in the case. They did not have that. That was not presented as evidence at the trial. Your thoughts on those questions and what that might mean that this jury is trying to figure out in that jury room?
It would suggest that they're trying to see if it's possible that she would have killed herself. You know, you're talking about length. How long is the gun? How could this have happened? You know, clearly suicide is in play, right? There's some evidence that he may have been close by due to cell phone records and those types of things. But to the point that was just made, there's a lot that suggests, one, that this could have happened a different way, including the own mother's thoughts. But there's also a suggestion that the jury may be biting because they're asking for information to say, how plausible is it? We don't trust him. We don't believe him. He's not particularly believable, but is it plausible that she could have killed herself under these circumstances? It's tough because one thing they're asking for, they can't get. The other thing that they're asking for, they won't get because there was never a presentation on it in terms of the lengths. So it's an interesting situation, and we'll have to see what happens. But I think that what they're looking at is the fact that maybe she did kill herself, or this grows a reasonable doubt and may allow this guy to hang this jury, despite the fact that he's not particularly truthworthy or trustworthy himself.
Absolutely, and it's going to boil down to whether one or two of those jurors believe his explanation of why he wasn't truthful. The fact that he felt in this day and age, being honest with police under these circumstances, not the best look for him as a young man. Let's turn now to Florida versus we heard a lot of testimony putting the defendant in various places, cell phone testimony. There was some DNA talked about and different things. But let's be honest here, David. This boils down to a he said, she said. Are they going to believe Isabella Tagliarini and the testimony she gave, or are they going to believe the story that's being put out there by the defense? So my question is, being a he said, she said, we heard from she, do we have to hear from he?
Well, I think he's got to testify, honestly. I mean, look, she's a powerful witness because there's a lot of corroborating evidence with her and her story. There's a neighbor that sees him loading something in the truck. There's the cell tower data. So that as a prosecutor, that's really how you want to corroborate a cooperating witness. You know, there's a saying out there, he who calls the co-conspirator or the co-defendant loses. And the prosecutor has to do everything in their power to bring the credibility to the co-defendant to prove this. But I'll tell you what, with the forensics, and there's not many others that potentially have done this, this guy's in trouble, to say the least.
Yeah. Joe, you know, they gave a sweetheart deal to Isabella Tagliarini, and I think it's fair for a jury to assume that somehow she's playing both sides against the middle and might have been a co-conspirator in this, not someone who truly feared for her life and was trying to go along with the best situation as it presented itself. If that is the case, and will the jury hold that against prosecutors at all? Will that affect their ability to get a guilty verdict in this case? The fact that if some of them believe they gave a sweetheart deal to someone who's just as guilty.
It's pretty powerful that, you know, she's an accessory to murder and she's only going to get 5 years. That's really powerful, and it makes you. It's one of the things that makes you go hum. Not to quote any CNC Music Factory song, but honestly, if I'm the jury, I'm going to want to almost independently verify anything other than her or aside from her. Somehow, the other evidence has got to ring true. But of course, she's part of the story, and so she is a central figure. So you would think perhaps that the story goes up or down with her. But if I'm the jury, and I'm really being objective and I'm really having an open mind, I'm going to look and see where the evidence takes me to see if incidentally, or, you know, Miss Tagliarini is an incidental beneficiary, for lack of a better term, of the fact that the evidence is very, very good all around her. So even her words aren't messing it up and taking it to a different place.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. And Joe, just for the record, you're free to quote CNC Music Factory on my show anytime. Anytime, all right? Any song.
I appreciate that.
All right, gentlemen, stand by. We do have to take a break. A small town in